I hear so many times from parents and teachers whose time is taken up with children in the classroom, whether they have a disability or whether they are autistic, that it is taking up the teacher's time. I think that we have more autistic children, and yet we are not providing the special classrooms or the schools for these autistic children.
This type of commentary from Pauline Hanson should easily be disregarded in our much-lauded egalitarian society. However, negative attitudes such as Hanson's still pervade the psyche of many Australians when it comes to understanding and including students with autism spectrum disorder in our schools. Myriad laws, declarations, policies and procedures are in place to ensure students are not discriminated against or excluded from education on the basis of their disability. The 1994 Salamanca Statement on Special Needs Education helped inform the inclusive belief that regular schools are the best way to combat discriminatory attitudes, create welcoming communities, build an inclusive society, and achieve education for all. This statement is important because inclusion is a concept that extends well beyond education to society itself. Someone may need to inform Pauline Hanson. Whilst the concept of inclusive education initially focused on access for students with disability, the term has transformed over the past 15 years to ensuring every Australian student receives an excellent and equitable education. This concept is exemplified in the 2019 Mapantwe Declaration, which supports every student to be the very best they can be, no matter where they live or what kind of learning challenges they may face. But in reality, many students with special needs are still routinely excluded in the academic and social spheres, whether it be from assessments that help to inform future funding and learning programs, from unmodified curriculum or tasks, or whether it be in the form of social exclusion within the school environment. These exclusionary practices can also be present as students move from primary to secondary school. This transition has been identified as a complex time requiring effective processes for all students to ensure engagement and optimal well-being. This is especially so for students with autism spectrum disorder, the numbers of whom have increased dramatically over the past decade, and who often struggle with the sensory overload, myriad teaching styles and personalities, and the higher organisational requirements required for secondary school. Many students struggle without the supports, relationships and funding they received in their primary years. In a 2018 TALIS survey, over half the teachers reported feeling underprepared to teach students with special needs, a metric that has only slightly improved in the past decade. Yet studies have found that holding a positive attitude towards inclusion trumps the need for the know-how in how to implement it, and early years pre-service teachers hold very positive attitudes towards inclusive education. However, these attitudes change once teachers start working in the classroom. Perhaps not surprisingly, due to their greater student numbers and a more siloed approach across subject departments, secondary teachers report lower levels of adaptation, less positive attitudes, and more barriers to inclusion compared with primary teachers. Despite the laws, policies and procedures to ensure every child receives an education on the same basis, the reality is many students' needs are still not being met, and social isolation and school exclusion remain all too common. So what more can be done to help make schools more inclusive, especially for students with ASD? Although there are policies and procedures mandating professional development for teaching special needs students, there remains a disconnect between differentiating the curriculum and creating a truly inclusive classroom. To improve student experiences, inclusive education requires attitudinal change across the spectrum, from social commentators to policymakers to all of those who work in and support schools. According to Hyde, inclusion is much related to an individual's social participation, access to quality education, and an enduring sense of well-being and school belonging, as it is to levels of academic achievement, specific competencies, or school placement considerations. One possible solution is to reconsider a multidisciplinary approach within secondary schools, where classroom teachers are supported by trained allied health professionals such as occupational therapists. Learning outcomes are improved when teachers and therapists work collaboratively, so rather than removing students for direct support, these therapists would observe and provide tools and strategies directly to teachers, ensuring services are provided in the least restrictive environment. This is important because studies have shown that awareness and knowledge of policies and procedures are not enough to reduce the stress that teachers report in teaching students with special needs, nor are teachers allied health professionals. Furthermore, as attitudes to inclusion are linked to teacher self-efficacy, the practical and timely implementation of inclusive practices provided by OTs would help alleviate the many concerns oft reported by teachers. Embedding OTs along with other allied health professionals such as psychologists and speech therapists improves the school transition experience for all students, not just academically but socio-emotionally and cognitively too. Whilst teachers remain focused on curriculum content, differentiation and equal outcomes in an increasingly diverse school environment, a multidisciplinary approach allows the necessary time, resources and experience for more holistic, inclusive attitudes to take form. Perhaps it is time to place more emphasis on how the students themselves view their feelings of inclusion, rather than whether our policies and practices are effective or not, because whilst commentators, policymakers, academics and educators all have a lot to say on the matter, at the core of it is the lived experiences of the students themselves.